On the 4th of May 1945, the 7th Infantry Regiment of Major General Iron Maiko Daniel's U.S. 3rd Infantry Division captured the town of Berchtesgaden in Lower Bavaria. 2 days earlier, the 3rd Infantry Division had been standing amidst the horrors of Dachau concentration camp, but now were asserting control over the Nazi leader's town. Although all eyes were on the ultimate prize, Hitler's house, the Berghof, and his even more famous mountaintop eyrie, the Eagle's Nest, high above Berchtesgaden, up a sinuous mountain road, some of the 3rd Division's units were given the task of checking and clearing the hundreds of properties in Berchtesgaden and its surrounding villages, which included some military installations and facilities and some leaders' homes, and also the mini Reich Chancellery, where government ministers lived and worked when Hitler was in residence at the Berghof. One of those houses was Reichsführer SS Heinrich Himmler's chalet at Schönau beside Königssee, a charming alpine lake. In my video, The Death of Himmler, Capturing Himmler's Love Nest, link in the end screen, I touched on the capture of this large house by US troops, one of 2 homes in Bavaria belonging to Himmler that fell into US Army hands at war's end, the other being his main family home at Tegernsee, south of Munich. Himmler had separated from his wife, Margarete, in 1940 and took up with one of his secretaries, Hedwig Potthast, in 1941. His wife and daughter continued to live in the house at Tegernsee, south of Munich, while his mistress and the 2 children Himmler fathered with her lived at Schönau in the chalet, the house named Schneewinkellehren. Himmler used the house as a base when he visited Hitler during the periods when the Führer was resident at his own huge chalet at Obersalzberg, a few kilometers up the mountain within the specially protected leader's village. Martin Bormann, Hitler's Machiavellian secretary, conspired to keep Himmler, his power rival, off the Obersalzberg, the Reichsführer not having a private house next to Hitler's, which forced the Reichsführer instead to purchase a chalet at Schönau. The alternative, which he had done for several years, was to stay in several Nazi leaders' special guest houses, which was of course inconvenient and unsuitable from a security point of view. On a recent trip to Bavaria, I was able to get a little closer to Himmler's old house, which is tucked away down a tiny lane beside a modern school, out of sight of the main road from Berchtesgaden. It is remarkably unchanged from World War II, though the interior has apparently been gutted and modernized, and instead subdivided into a series of self-contained holiday lets. The property consists of 4 main parts: the main house, which originally belonged, as I mentioned in a previous video, to famous psychoanalyst Dr. Sigmund Freud, where Potthast, the children and household servants resided, and in which Himmler lived when he visited the area. A 3-car garage block beside it, and the service building, which would have housed some of Himmler's Order Police escort unit that guarded him, along with his RSD bodyguard detachment and his closest SS aides and servants. And not visible in my photographs, there is an air raid bunker behind the building, in the tree line, for Himmler's use in the event of an emergency. At war's end, Himmler was in northern Germany at the headquarters of Hitler's successor as leader Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz. However, Potthast abandoned Schneewinkellehren and fled to Austria before US troops reached the area. The first jeep loads of American soldiers would have driven through the main gate and approached the house with some caution, worried about ambush, landmines, or booby traps. Forcing an entry into the property, they quickly cleared the building room by room and found it was empty of people but rammed with personal possessions, not the least of which were Himmler's uniforms, his medals, weapons, and various other interesting items. Intelligence officers also scoured the building for anything of use. The interesting Himmler objects were of course soon looted by souvenir-hungry GIs and occasionally turn up at auctions in the US over the past 15 years. For example, this shotgun, which apparently belonged to Hedwig Potthast and was a gift from Heinrich Himmler and was sold recently in the US. When the GIs checked the garage block, they found an extremely impressive and valuable prize sitting quietly inside. This huge Mercedes-Benz 770K sedan, a special leader's model that had been loaned semi-permanently to Himmler from the Reich Chancellery motor pool in Berlin for his exclusive use when at Berchtesgaden. The Americans and also the French, whose 2nd Armoured Division was actually first up the mountain to Obersalzberg, captured several of Hitler's cars, and these survive today in public and private collections all over the world. The 770K sedan was used by Himmler to travel from the Schneewinkel chalet the 7 kilometers or 4.7 miles up the mountain to the Berghof, or to take him to and from Einring airfield, where he would fly in and out in his personal Focke-Wulf 200 Condor. Himmler's car was one of 10 W150 Type II 770K sedans built by Mercedes-Benz for Nazi leaders, being delivered to the Reich Chancellery in 1943. This was not a parade car per se, but rather a secure limousine for official travel, having a hard top, unlike Hitler's cars, and the same higher level of security as the Führer's limousines. It must be remembered that Himmler's second-in-command, Reinhard Heydrich, had been mortally wounded after being blown up by a hand grenade tossed at him whilst travelling in an open-top limousine in Prague. Since that incident, Nazi leaders' security had been beefed up considerably. Himmler was of course always aware that as being probably the second most powerful man in Germany and one of the most hated, he was a target for assassination by various groups, and therefore took his security very seriously indeed. The vehicle was heavily armoured and could withstand small arms fire, including having extremely thick bulletproof windows, and an armoured floor that could deflect the blast of a mine. Spotlights were fitted on each side of the front doors, and the car had a sophisticated central locking system that was activated from inside to prevent anyone from opening the doors from the outside, to prevent an assassination attempt or someone tossing in a bomb. For winter driving, special tubes blew warm air onto the outside of the windscreen to prevent fogging, and the car weighed a staggering 4.5 tons. However, its inline 8-cylinder 230 horsepower engine gave it a top speed of 140 kilometers an hour, that is 87 miles per hour, but high speeds caused tremendous pressure on the tires, and the drivers normally cruised along at about 80 kilometers an hour or 50 miles per hour. A 4-door, 6-seat behemoth, it carried a number plate registered to the Berlin Police Regiment. However, when Himmler was in any vehicle, of which he had several dotted all over Germany, his escort command normally affixed a vanity plate to the car that read SS1, so nobody could be under any doubts as to who was riding inside. When Himmler was driven anywhere, depending on where he was going, an escort car or cars containing bodyguards and police trailed the limousine, full of heavily armed men whose only job was to protect Himmler from harm. What happened to Himmler's car after it was captured on the 4th of May 1945 is a little hazy. As it is still in Germany and not in America, we can probably assume that it was pressed into service with the US Army as a transport vehicle for high-ranking officers, many of whom subsequently used captured Nazi leaders' vehicles. Today, Himmler's 770K sits in the Auto- and Technik Museum in Sinsheim, Germany, alongside 2 of Hitler's large parade cars. A fascinating Himmler relic and a very important and rare piece of automotive history as well. Many thanks for watching. Please subscribe and share, and also visit my audiobook channel, War Stories with Mark Felton. You can also help to support both of my channels at PayPal and Patreon. Details in the description box below.